club football doesn't really have deep roots in Asia. China, Korea, Japan, Australia, none of their leagues have a history that goes back beyond the 80s. But that's not the case in Hong Kong. And here, still thriving, in one of the world's great cities, is Asia's original super club.
In its 106 years of existence, South China's prowess at football has virtually become its mission statement. It's the oldest football team in Hong Kong, and it has a glorious history.
South China has over a century of history. It's also the club I played for the longest during my playing career. I know there's great pressure, whether you're a player or a coach.
South China has a never-say-die fighting spirit, and that's why so many people like them. South China is the team that other teams are jealous of.
Whenever I was growing up, you just see, and you always hear about them, they're the biggest ones that you would always hear of. You'd always see them playing the high-profile games against teams from abroad. They'd always have like the best foreign players playing for them. So yeah, growing up, you'd always see them as like the biggest club in Hong Kong.
Where to start with South China? To begin with, they're not just a football club, they field teams in any number of sports. Based on Hong Kong Island, with their old football pitch now a training ground for the juniors, their roots lie in the early years of the last century, a time when sport was the preserve of foreigners in the then British colony. But local Chinese started taking an interest. They formed their own association and quickly became very good. When China made its international football debut, taking part in the first Far Eastern Games in Manila in 1913, South China supplied the entire team. They toured Southeast Asia and Australia. They were a major local institution, and after the war they simply picked up where they left off. In Hong Kong's football heyday in the 80s, five-figure crowds regularly turned up to watch them play. Life may be rather different these days, but one fact remains constant. South China is the team to beat. 41 times they've been champions. These days, Kitchi provide the main opposition and have in fact won 3 of the last 4 titles. But if you're a South China fan, you can be pretty certain that's only temporary. In fact, the only time South China fell into the doldrums was when they retained a Chinese-only policy in the face of a flood of foreign professionals. Businessman Wallace Chung is currently convener of South China's football section.
That's the sort of thing that happened over 20 years ago. And I'm not really in a position to comment on something that South China did 20 years ago. But I do know that South China didn't always rely on foreign players in the past. That had to change with the times. Importing foreign players has now become a very normal practice. It's also an immediate way to narrow the gap between football internationally and football played here in Hong Kong.
South China's squad is a blend of locals and experienced foreigners, including Ecuador's former national keeper Christian Mora. It hasn't been a perfect start to the season, but coach Yung Ching Kwong knows that silverware is still an expectation for the fans.
Although we now have a brand new Premier League, there's no difference in South China's attitude. South China is a football powerhouse with a long history in Hong Kong, so our goal is always to win the title. And as the coach, I have to place my emphasis on the players' performances, their attitude, and so on in an effort to make sure we are victorious.
Hong Kong's new Premier League is an effort to bring the local game into line with the AFC's Champions League licence system. That could mean horizons will become considerably wider for South China. Ever since they reached the final of the old Asian Cup Winners' Cup back in 1994, the focus has been on domestic silverware. Wallace Chung hopes this will change soon.
South China has established itself at the top of football in Hong Kong. It has such a long history. But now my hope is that South China can play at the continental level and make a success of it. Kitchee made it to the latter stages of the AFC Cup this season, but we want to do better than them. This is our hope, and we certainly think we're capable of doing it. This club has a strong sense of mission, and we have the expectation that we're able to make the next step.
This time, South China let Kitchee get away with a draw. But with the club still in contention for the league and 3 cup competitions to play for, there's no doubt the club is heading in the right direction.
It's been improving these past few years. We have some good foreign players now. 5 or 6 years ago, our foreign players weren't as good, but now things are looking up.
The club game in Asia is changing fast. It's good to know that one of the continent's most traditional names is determined it won't be left behind.